Hi guys and welcome back. Today is finally the question and answer day. So in the last video, I asked for you guys to give me some things you'd like me to talk about, specifically questions in the comments. So I am doing that and I'm really excited to see what you guys are thinking and what you want to hear more about. This is also actually really helpful for me knowing what videos to do in the future. So specific topics that I see a lot of, I'll make sure to make a note on that so I can make more things that really focus on those. But for now, we're just going to have some little chit chat about art and I'm going to talk about stuff. So right now I am actually working on inking my next piece. So we're just going to do this real time and it's going to be nice and just relaxed. And this is just the process that I go through when I'm doing inking. So it actually takes a pretty good amount of time. Most of my pieces, the largest part of it is the inking process. So we're going to go ahead and watch that while I answer some questions. And if I do see repeats, I'll just go ahead and skip those just so we can keep it concise. But I will take note on the things. Like I said, if I see something that's repeated a lot, I'll make sure that I expound on that a little bit more in the future. But yeah, and one more little note of information. I do now offer free shipping on orders over $35 in the US and over $75 international. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, I have a link in the description and in the end card that will take you to my art shop. So if you're curious about anything over there, they do have free shipping now on a certain tier. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in with some of these questions. Blue Bovine asks, you might have been asked this a lot, but how do you get the inspiration for your themes, concepts, and characters in your art? I have a lot of trouble thinking up ideas and concepts, and it frustrates me. Yeah, I know how you feel. I do not feel like it comes naturally to me at all. I do have to fight a little bit more to get things down and ideas, but mostly it's just an amalgamation of all the things that I look at and consume as far as entertainment, and ultimately it comes out somehow. But yeah, I look at a lot of artists, a lot of photographs. I listen to music that I find inspiring. I look at everything that I can that will give me insight and inspiration. And sometimes it's really hard. And I find that when I come up with a challenge for myself, like I need to design a character that fits in this specific prompt, or I need to create a piece that fits with these parameters, it can help push me in the right direction. But yeah, it's a struggle to make sure that it all comes into something that I'm excited about. One thing that I'm beginning to realize is that I will give up on drawings or concepts a little bit earlier than I should be, because there's a lot of things that I'll sit down and I'll wish like, oh, I need to have an idea right now before I even start drawing what I'm going to create. And I need to know it now so I can start drawing. And the way that I work is very opposite of that. I will start off with this little tiny nugget of an idea. It's not interesting. It's not amazing yet, but it's just like, I'm going to draw a princess in a profile. But once I start drawing, I can start editing that idea. I add more. I look at Pinterest again. I look for ideas as I'm drawing, and as I'm drawing and I incorporate new ideas and I see things that I'm putting down, and it gets my creative ideas going. So it's much, much, much easier to make something work out of something than nothing. So I'm trying to get past the sitting there staring at a blank sheet and thinking I need to have an idea, and starting to just go with the first thing and edit it as I go along, include new things, look for connections that I can create and stories that I can start infusing into it. So yeah, put something down and then start thinking about it if you feel really stuck. Not Important asks, do you have any advice on how to stay driven to actually drawing? Kind of answered this, but again, deadlines, making sure that there's something that I have to do, period. There's no question about it. One thing that has really helped me in the past is when I had like a drawing challenge, so like Inktober, where I had to do an ink drawing every single day for October. When I did that, I felt so ready for the next day. I mean, when I started at the beginning, it was getting motivation was a little bit harder, getting that momentum. And there were always days where it was like, wow, I really do not feel like working on this. But the fact that it was like building up on itself and forcing me to stay motivated each day to the next, it was really helpful, actually. I felt by the end of that month, I felt so creatively charged of all these things that I learned that I wanted to do more of. So if you're having a hard time staying motivated, create a challenge for yourself like that, maybe, where you have to do something every single day. And it's helped me. It really has, actually. Shannon Wells asks, do you have your own custom Photoshop brushes and can we get a hold of them? I used to, I don't use them anymore. Like, bought that mega pack of brushes that I love and they're great. So again, I have the link down in the description, so if you want to check those out, that's all the brushes that I use now. Supa Vixen asks, your art is such an inspiration. How do you keep motivated and stop being stuck in a rut? And do you struggle with mental illness? I personally do and have found that myself and other artists do suffer from various things. Thanks for keeping it fresh and helping me improve my videos. With my videos. Yeah, I absolutely know what you mean with the struggle with motivation, because that, before I started college and, well, my art program in college and YouTube after that, I had a hard time staying motivated. I knew somehow I knew that I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to create art. That was me. That was the core part of me. But there was still this thing that I had to fight to make sure that I was actually doing it and following through with that. So like I've mentioned, I have had very hard times in my life where I didn't have any motivation to draw. So I absolutely know where you're coming from that. The one and only thing that has helped me conquer that is having a dedicated schedule and deadlines. When I went to school and I started getting into the higher level art program classes that I had to take for my BFA, there were deadlines. I absolutely had to get that piece done, period. And the fact that there was that weight behind it. If I didn't get it done, I was going to fail that class. There would be consequences. And now that I have YouTube, I have to get a video up that day, that time, period. That's it. That's my job. That's what I have to do. And I know it's hard to force yourself to stick to a deadline when there's no outside pressures, but that's one thing that has really helped me, is forcing myself to say, okay, I'm going to get this piece done by this time. And when I don't feel like drawing, even when it's just extra sketching, I'll say, okay, I'm going to sketch for this amount of time. I'm going to sketch for 15 minutes. Maybe I don't feel like drawing at all, but if I pull out my sketchbook and I say, I'm going to sketch for 15 minutes and I'm going to draw and then I can be done, that helps me get over that a little bit, at least. Sometimes it will spark me and then I'll just keep drawing and I don't want to stop. Or I'll get to that 15 minutes and I'll be like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not making anything that I'm happy with, so I'm just going to be done. And that's okay because I made myself draw something. So yeah, make deadlines and make small, easy to accomplish goals like that. Small little chunks of time. Say I'm going to draw 15 minutes every single day, period, and I'll make it happen. And yeah, that's the only thing that helps for me, is having that rigid structure behind everything to force me to do it. As far as mental illness, I haven't struggled with anything like that, but I can say that pretty much all artists, we suffer emotionally. I do anyways. I have many, many times where I just feel so down on myself. I feel really, really frustrated with my direction in life, with all the artwork that I'm doing, with everything that I have and what I'm not accomplishing. It can be so hard on me. And I know that that's something that pretty much all of us go through, because art is just it's us. It's not like another job where you leave it and it's done. It's what you're creating is you. It's an expression of yourself and you're putting it out there. So it is absolutely understandable that it's something that we suffer for, we struggle with, because we want the things that we're putting out there from ourselves to be as good as possible. So I cannot say that my path through my artistic journey and through life has been easy, but yeah, it's a thing to overcome, the negative feelings that come with being an artist. It can be hard, but I think I'm getting there. I'm getting a handle on it, one day at a time. Despo Anna asks, hey, I love your style and your art. You are one of my favorite YouTube artists. Thank you so much. That makes me really happy. But may I ask which camera you use for filming your videos? Yes, I recently, well, maybe 6 months ago. I might have had it a while ago. But I got a new camera and it's a Canon 80D, so 80D, and it is a super overpowered camera for YouTube videos. You do not need a camera that is that expensive or that overpowered, because it does actually downgrade when I put it onto YouTube. But I wanted to make sure that I got a camera that took really good photos, because I take photos of my finished pieces to turn them into prints. So that's a camera that I can get several uses out of. Basically, I use it instead of a scanner, but yeah, it's a great, great, great camera, but it's kind of it's super overpowered. It is really ridiculous. It's great for photography too. Me and my husband, we are he's more into photography than I am, but I am interested in it. So this camera is great for like several aspects, but yeah, the Canon 80D. I've had people ask me before if I would do prints, but I have no idea where to start with that. I would love to be able to create and sell my own art prints without having to go somewhere else to create them. When it comes down to creating your own art prints, it is definitely an investment. I feel like when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you are getting a good printer right away. You don't want to get a subpar printer that still costs a lot and then realize that you need a better one in only a few years and then you've already outgrown it. So I suggest making sure that when you're ready to take that plunge of creating your own your own prints, that you are ready to invest money into it so that you can get everything that you need and get it good quality. I use I have to look at it to remember what it's called, a Canon Pixma Pro 1, and it's a very professional, nice, amazing printer, and I love it, but it was a significant cost, and I knew that it would be, and that's okay. It's okay to allow yourself to make investments in your future and in things that you're going to be selling. So yeah, I think it's just, don't cheap out on it. Don't let yourself cut too many costs so that your prints don't look professional, because you want them to be as good as they can be, and you don't want to get to a point where you do have to level up what you have. But that's the printer that I use. I source all my paper from Red River Paper, and I love the stuff that they have. They have lots of different things available. So I've tried several different types of paper, but basically I use two types. I use Illuster for digital prints because it has a very slight sheen, but it's really rich for the really dark colors that my digital stuff has. And then I have matte paper that I print all of my traditional stuff on. So it mimics the mediums that I use a little bit better. But yeah, Red River Paper for your paper. Canon Pixma Pro 1 is my printer, and I love it. It's a great one. Also, to add, you do also want to make sure that you get the cellophane little bags. I just get those on Amazon. I just search cellophane bags in the right size, because that's what you package them in. It'll keep them very protected. So pretty much in any situation where you're going to be selling them, you want them to be sealed up and protected. So I put my prints in those cellophane bags. Danica, my question is, what tools and their setup in Photoshop would you advise for someone who wants to start using it no matter what their level? Thank you for taking some time for us, and thank you for showing your art. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Actually, I just maybe a couple of weeks ago I bought and downloaded this huge pack of brushes, and let me read what it's actually called. It's Kyle's Ultimate Mega Pack for Photoshop CS5 and up, and I'll have a link in the description. I'm not sponsored by them. I just really like the brush pack, but this one is really great because it has a ton of different types of brushes. So especially if you're just starting out and you don't really know what kind of brush you want to use, this has a lot of really great ones. He also has one that's called the Animator's Pencil that is a free one, so you can either add it on or just get it for free. I added it on with the Mega Pack, but that is my go-to sketching brush now because it feels really natural, so I suggest that particular brush, but also that one as well. And when it comes down to it, I would just suggest looking up tutorials on how to use the brush preset, or the brush panel, because the more you understand what goes into how a brush behaves, the more you can tailor it to exactly what you want. So there are many times where I'll take a brush that I've bought or I've gotten for free from an artist or whatever the source is, and I know exactly how I wish it behaved, and because I have already studied and I know how to manipulate it, I can go into that brush panel and exactly make that happen so it'll behave the way I want it to. So yeah, study how the brush panel works and maybe think about that brush pack because it's really nice, or at least go look at some of his free ones and try those out. He has several free ones that are really great. Benedict Morelli asks, do you like acrylic paint? P.S. I love you and your art. Thank you very much. I don't have a ton of experience with acrylic. I'd love to get more into using them because I do think I'd really enjoy getting more painterly. And I like the fact that unlike oil, it is a lot more easy to clean up, I guess. And I like that aspect of it. But yeah, I have a ton of it. I haven't used it a lot. So I'm open to using it more and figuring it out. The reason it feels so foreign to me is that I do feel very attached to line art, and that feels so like me. That's how I understand art. That's how I go about creating art, is line art as this like structure. So when it comes to acrylic, it would take a very different approach to it, which I think would be really helpful and healthy for me, honestly. So I would like to do more. I own it, so I might as well actually put it down. But I haven't done a ton of it, so I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it yet. And I love the idea of doing it because one of my YouTubers is an acrylic painter. But Leilani Joy, if you haven't watched her videos, please watch her videos. They are addicting. They're gorgeous to watch when she just puts down these like beautiful flat painting things. Oh, I love them. But yeah, I'll have a link to her video actually down below, or to her channel, because she's one of my favorites. But yeah, Leilani Joy, great acrylic painter. Zacharoni asks, why do you draw? More specifically, why draw over something else, any other job or hobby? I'm curious why you wanted to pursue art as a job. When it comes to art, I just feel it feels amazing to create something and to put it out there. Sometimes I think about like, how do people who are not artists, how do they feel when it comes to not creating art? Like, it's unfathomable to me to not have a creative outlet like that. So I don't know. It just, the feeling that I get when I do create a piece and it belongs to me and it's something that's building up and it's putting a new thing out into the world. I don't know how I would live without it, honestly. I do not know how I would be a person without creating art. They do not go separately. I couldn't be a person without making something, without putting artwork out there. So I don't know. It's just, it feels so right to make something and so wrong not to make something. But when it comes to making it a job, I wanted that to be my thing. I wanted to be a professional artist because that's what motivated me to exist. It's what made me excited to wake up. It made me excited to work on things. And it made me feel like I was adding to the world and making things better, even if it was just like this really small little addition to it. The fact that it was like, this doesn't exist without me and I'm putting it out there and it is a thing now. It feels good. So I don't know. I think it's just maybe just an egotistical thing of just feeling like I'm putting a mark down, even if it's something small. But yeah, I would always have some sort of creative outlet. I know that for a fact. I don't think I could be someone without having that. But art is my thing. The Light Wells asks, I'm curious about how you use references. I know you've done a couple of videos about them very recently, but I'd like to actually see the photos that you're working off of as you sketch a particular piece. Or could you show us the piece that you've already done and the references you used for it? You said, I think, that you're not tied to the references and you do change things and make them your own. And I'm curious about how you go about that. Since I draw from references, I almost always just completely recreate the figure I am referencing. Thanks. Yeah, I'll, like I mentioned, I'll have a link to my Pinterest in the description below, and I'll make sure that, because like I said, I have it as like a private folder, not that it needs to be, but I will make sure that that is publicly viewable so you guys can see all of the references that I usually use for like art inspiration. But I won't actually put them ever in a video because those are photos that pretty much anything that you find on the internet you should assume is copyright. So I don't want to recreate them or recopy them into a video form. So I won't ever actually put them in a video, but I will make sure that you guys can actually access my Pinterest board that I pin them to. But when it comes to making references your own, it's really just about making correct decisions, I guess you could say. So when I'm using a reference, I will slowly wean myself off of using the reference. So when I'm starting off, like this one, for example, I used a reference for this woman's face. I used references a lot more when I was drawing her out to make sure that I had the anatomy correct and the proportions. And then I stopped looking at that reference as much. So I started looking more at my picture. So I guess you could say when I'm starting off with using a reference, I'll look at the reference itself, say 80% of the time, and draw 20. And then as I work on it more and more, I will look at the reference less until it's like 10% reference, 90% drawing. And the more I look at my drawing, the more I can make specific decisions to the drawing itself rather than trying to make them look more like the references that I'm using. So for this one, I drew that face, but I originally had her shoulders straight on like the actual photo had it, but I realized it was not working with the composition that I wanted, so I shifted it so that it was more of a profile to match the face itself. And that was a decision I made after looking at my drawing itself. So I stopped looking at the reference at that point, and I was looking at how does it fit with the overall drawing. So there's a point where you just have to begin looking at just your piece and making those choices to make it fit what your idea of where you want it to go is. Finns R asks, do you stretch your watercolor paper, and how do you get the ripped looked edges on my watercolor paper while keeping the edge of the paper straight? I actually don't stretch my watercolor paper. When I took my class, it was with a really incredible, amazing teacher. She was very masterful, but we didn't go into that. We didn't learn about that. The method that I learned in that class is a method that I still use now. That's just where we tape it down securely to a board, and then as it dries, it helps it lay flat. I actually am interested in looking into that and figuring out how to stretch paper and then deciding if I want to continue that. So it is something that I'll do some research on and maybe incorporate in the way that I work. But for now, I actually don't. I just tape it down really securely with drafter's tape, and drafter's tape is low tack tape. So don't use the manila tape that you find at like Walmart that's just like a couple dollars. That stuff is still really sticky and it can tear up your paper. So make sure that you're looking for artist tape or drafter's tape. But as far as the deckled edge of the watercolor paper, this is one of my favorite things to do actually, is just you take the sheet, and I have a bone folder, and I'll have a link in the description to a bone folder as well. And I use one of these like clay knives. They're used to like cut through clay, and I'll see if I can find the link actually, because both of these things I bought from the teacher for that class, but you can use just like a really, like the back of a butter knife or something smooth like that to tear it. But basically what you do is you take the watercolor paper and you fold it in half, and you make sure that the edges and the corners are all very straight and flush. That way you're going to keep it nice and square throughout. But you fold the paper in half and then take that bone folder and really press into that crease. And basically this is the same thing you do with paper when you're like in middle school, but you crease it and then fold it over and then crease it again and fold it over and crease it again. And you just keep doing that until it's really soft and pressed. And then I take my butter knife, basically my clay knife, and I'll slide it in between the end of the paper. So say it's here and it's folded really nice and crisp right there and it's ready. I'll just take the knife and I'll stick it in there and I'll just tear it right down the paper. I can actually show this maybe in a future video of when I tear it, because it's really pleasant. But you just do that, you tear it, you'll get that same teared edge, and that is great for the paper that I use when I use these huge loose leaf paper, because they have that deckled edge as well, so it just mimics that. And then you just, each time you tear it in half, you can tear it again and you break it down that way, half by half. But yeah, just use a kitchen knife and a bone folder and you'll get great results that way. The Beanstar asks, for my characters, I have a hard time making the faces look different, and when I try, females look like males and vice versa. How do you draw your face shapes? This is something that I do want to include more of in the stuff that I do. I want to have more differences in it. I do fall in the trap of muscle memory, drawing the same character again and again a little bit. So I am trying to be more conscientious about that. But one thing that really can just help is just paying attention to the specific features that you draw the same. If you realize that you're just drawing a nose without looking at a new nose, that might be a good place to start. Go find a picture of a nose that has a different shape than what you draw, or a face that has a different jawline. That's where Pinterest comes in for me. I look up a lot of pictures of people who have features that are different from what I normally draw. And I will save them in a folder, and then when I'm drawing something, I will go look at that and see how different faces are shaped, and then I start including those in my drawings. So again, you cannot create something out of nothing. So you can't just like imagine something that you've never have anything else to support that in your head. So go look at pictures of people with faces that are different from what you draw and begin collecting those as pictures on your computer or as pictures in your mind, and sketching those and drawing them. And that's just really helpful. Look at different ethnicities, at people from different countries. That will help you expand beyond just the same face shape that you normally see. So yeah, references. That's what I'll put out there. That is the key to getting variety in your pieces. Hannah Milojo asks, how do you draw the same character from different positions or emotions without making it look like a completely different character? Use guidelines. This is 100% what you need to do if you want to get it really accurate, is just draw the face how you want it the first time, and then draw them out from the top of the head, from the top of the eyebrows, the bottom of the eyebrows, the top of the eyes, the bottom of the eyes, every mark like that, draw it out, and then draw it again. And once you get everything to line up that way, it will look accurate. It'll look correct. So even when it's at a 3/4 angle, the eyes are still going to be the same height as they are when they're straight on. And there are some liberties that you have to start figuring out as far as like, if you draw a character straight on when they're in profile, there are lots of different ways that you can draw that same face in profile that's different. So it comes time to just making decisions as far as how that will be portrayed and then making sure that it follows through on each pose that's similar. But yes, ultimately just get guidelines so that they have the same proportion throughout. That will absolutely make the correct character. Because if you're varying as far as things like length of the nose or the shape that the nose is creating, if that's becoming varied, it will change the character. So proportions, that's all I can really say, is that's a big deal. And also doing like turnarounds, so like where you draw a character from the front to the side to the back, that's how you do them. You draw a line straight across from each mile marker, each feature that you need to make sure is accurate. Finn Armstrong asks, how do you draw 3/4 view portraits? And I'm struggling with anatomy. Is there a video about either? Please tell me, because I just got my first copies. I'm so happy about them. Yeah, I don't think I know of a particular anatomy video. There are a lot available, so they are very helpful. When it comes down to it, just study anatomy, study photos of 3/4 views, and start analyzing like the actual relative distances between things. That's how you get things more accurate. You look at it and you think, okay, I can measure from, say, the top of the head to the bottom of the head. That's the same distance as from the shoulder to the hand, depending on where the position is. So once you start analyzing exactly the measurements, you can start getting much more accurate anatomy. It can easily fall into where if you're not making these measurements, you'll make things inaccurate because it feels like you know how to draw a hand or you know the length of something, but when you actually start measuring it, you realize that like maybe that arm is way too long. And once you get it correct with the way that it should be proportioned, as well as just how it fits with that pose, it makes it immediately better. So just get used to taking measurements when you're drawing. That's another great thing that using photos can help, is that you can draw right on top of it. You can make marks and measurements and then compare it to somewhere else. So yeah, that actually adds a lot of benefit to it that drawing from life actually can't. So, well, you can to a certain degree, but it's easier when you're doing it on paper. Peanut Butter Bee Rainbow. The question is, I was wondering how you feel about seeing other artists that make more art than you or are progressing more than you. Sometimes when I see artists doing this, I feel negatively about my art and not want to make more. Yeah, I totally get you. There's some artists that I follow that I consider a little bit more like contemporary to me, who they're creating more art, they're way better than me. And there are definitely times in my life, in my particular mood, where it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that I'm not there yet. And I think that this is one of those hard ones where it's always going to be there in the back of your mind. But I think that I've made some pretty solid strides as far as not letting that be the way that I think. When I think those thoughts, I just cut it right there. I just say, that's awesome. That's great that they're creating more artwork. That's great that they're really good. I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to go draw more. I'm going to go draw. So it's really something that I'm trying to be more aware of when I do think those things and not think so negatively about them. I address the fact that, yeah, that's a feeling that artists get. That's a feeling that I get, but I'm not going to feel negative about it. I know that's really like not helpful because it's all in your head, but I just try to be more positive about everything that I'm thinking when it comes to my artwork. Just way more just like shrug it off. Just let it be a passing thought and then it's gone. I don't fixate on it. I don't let it sit in my mind. I just address the fact that I thought it and then it's gone. And then it's time to make more art. But yeah, it can be really, really hard to compare yourself to others, but like that phrase goes, comparison is the thief of joy. Something, I totally butchered that. But basically, it's just learn to recognize when you're thinking things like that and when it's affecting your mood and try to be aware of it so that you can move on from it. And James Campbell asks, hi Danica, not sure if you've answered this before yet, but what are your feelings about drawing from life versus drawing from photographs, either printed or from the screen? I've read that drawing from photographs is bad because the camera already flattens the image and that you should only draw from life when you're learning. I find it difficult to find opportunities to draw people from life, so your advice would be welcome. This is a really good question, actually, and it is true that when you look at a photo, it is actually already looking at a representation of life, but not an actual reality. It's not a perfect representation of what actually happened. So in that way, yes, it is true that it's never going to be as accurate as drawing from life. But I would not say that you cannot learn from drawing from photographs. If you're already thinking about that and you're drawing from life, from photos, from anything like that that's real, you're in the right step. You will absolutely learn from drawing from photographs. And I know how that is. Like, I do not have a ton of resources as far as art resources in the community. So I don't actually have a life drawing thing available to me right now. So it isn't always available for everyone. Is it best? Yes, it is very helpful. Does it mean that you can only learn from that or you're learning it wrong? No, do not let yourself get scared of using photo references. That is a huge useful reference for yourself. When I was taking figure drawing class, which I had to take for college, it was where we would sit there and draw, but then we would also take pictures of the models and we'd take those home and still study them. We would continue learning and we would use those to fix the mistakes in the anatomy on our sketches. So ultimately, they are both extremely useful. The fact that you can have a photo anywhere, anytime makes it accessible all the time, which means you can learn all the time. So no, you do not need to be afraid of using photos. I have been taught that yes, from life is most accurate, but I've never heard someone saying don't learn from a photo, because it will absolutely not be right, because it will be right and you will get better at it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I always use photo references. Quinn NGN asks, how do you draw two eyes at the same time? I can't draw a face from the front angle. It's easy. I just take an extra spare sheet of paper and then I'll lay it down and I'll measure out the length of an eye as well as the width. And then I'll take that length, and a rule of thumb is that an eye is usually one eye apart. So I'll take that line and then I will just space it one eye out and then another eye out, and then I will measure it out. And then I'll take the width as well and make sure that everything's just nice and square. And with those guidelines, once I have them the same size, it's a lot easier to start matching it down. And if I'm really struggling, I can just start taking more measurements to make sure that they start having closer ties to them. But yeah, scrap piece of paper, just using it like a little ruler is really helpful, just making sure that they're exactly accurate. Ara Ocampo asks, you're good at line art and I'm hella bad at it. I just want to know what tips you can give during the line art stage of making an illustration. So yeah, line work is one of my absolute favorite things. It feels really exciting when it's just like really crisp and done. But it did take a lot of practice. So I would say do practice sheets of the medium that you're using. So I use a lot of microns, but you can use microns, brush and ink, anything like that. Just make sure that you understand the tool itself really well. And also a large part of creating really dynamic, interesting line work is figuring out where the thicks and thins need to be so that it looks like it reads really well. And that keeps it from looking too monotone where everything is the same width or anything like that. So I will look at the illustration and figure out ways that I can incorporate thicker lines, areas that it would make sense for it to be thicker. So places where there would be a shadow or an overlapping kind of a shape. So if there's a shape underneath another shape, I will thicken that border line, and that really helps push the depth. So there's a lot of control you have over how close things look and how lit up things look, even in just the line work. So start figuring out where dark, thick lines can make sense. I usually do thick lines on the bottom of the jawline or inside of the ear where there would be a shadow. Things like that can really emphasize depth, will really push it to the next level. But as far as actually creating the specific line, I usually go over the line several times depending on the medium that I'm using and how smooth I'm able to get it and how long it is. So just be ready to go over a line until it gets smooth and crisp. For me, it's not a one-shot thing usually. I usually can't get a really smooth line first, especially when I'm using microns. When I'm using microns, I will go over it several times until it gets thick and smooth. And that helps me fix issues early on rather than trying to get it all in one stroke. I can just build it up till it smooths out any imperfections from the beginning. And Majestic Kitty Artist asks, you are a very big inspiration to me, but I would like to know who or what inspires you the most when it comes to creating an original art piece. First off, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But I have a lot of artists that I really look up to. Classically, I'll start with Alphonse Mucha. He's one of many people's inspirations. He has gorgeous line work, and he was during the Art Deco period, so just the shape language he has is phenomenal, and the design aesthetic that he has is just a great resource to learn. So if you want to get better at art, I would study his work and see how he made these design decisions and why he made them, and learn from that. That's one of the resources that I always go to when I'm feeling really stuck as far as new compositions or how to resolve things. I'll look at how he frames everything out, and it is really helpful to figure that out. But yeah, he's one of my all-time favorites. Jaw Cooper is another. She has really dynamic figures and dynamic animals, and they have the most interesting compositions. I'm surprised at how much she can bend the muscles and arms and just things like that. She really pushes the shape that things create. So she is one of my all-time favorites as well. I'm going to say that about all of these that I talk about, but Jaw Cooper, and then there is Wiley Beckert. She has been one of my absolute favorite artists for years and years and years, but she has gorgeous work. And I remember years ago I was reading on her blog how she talked about she was a professional artist, but she looked at her work and she realized that it was just not cutting it. It was not good enough. And at the time I was looking at it and it was phenomenal. It was so far above me that I was like, how can you be thinking that? But she took it into her own hands to dedicate herself to getting better and to learning. And that was so motivational to me, but it also just really left a mark as far as remembering that the improvement that we have in our artwork is in our hands. We can immediately start getting better now. And sometimes I can feel really out of your own hands, it's just so far away. It's not something that you can control. It's something else entirely. It's something that only time can give you. And reading that felt so empowering and exciting. So it has always stuck with me. But yeah, she has absolutely gorgeous work. And after that, she really did improve. Her work got incredible, and it was amazing to begin with. So to see that improvement and to see someone else do it, it just reminded me that's in my control. I can do that too. But yeah, I suggest looking up her work. It is a huge inspiration for me. And I'll have links down below for all of these artists as well, so you can check them out. And Parseltongue Hufflepuff asks, tips for beginning artists, digital artists, please. And yeah, this is a very tricky transition to make for artists, moving from traditional to digital. I think pretty much almost everyone, I'll say that, almost everyone struggles with this because it feels so foreign, and the way of turning it into a reality is way different in your brain than it is when it's traditional. I don't know. I remember when I did it, it was really shocking because it did feel so out of my comfort zone. But like I mentioned earlier, one thing that helped me was I just did it incrementally. So I started off with where I was sketching, I was drawing first, and then I would scan it in, doing that traditionally, I should say. And then I would scan it in, and then I would color it. And then I got comfortable with that, and then I started forcing myself to figure out how to ink. And then I started making myself draw digitally, and that was a huge step in the right direction. Once I figured out how to actually sketch on the tablet and write into Photoshop, it opened a lot of doors. So I think one thing that could have helped me a lot sooner is if I started incorporating those a little bit sooner. But what I could have done, I think, and what might help is scan in drawings or sketches that you already have, and then try sketching on top of it. Make sure that that drawing that you've scanned in first is a low enough opacity so that when you're drawing in Photoshop, that drawing is coming through forefront. You can see that clearly. But that might help bridge the gap where you're starting off with something that you are very comfortable with and you've already created in a way that you feel very confident with, and then starting to marry those things together. So yeah, work off of your traditional stuff, and that will help you get a little bit more comfortable with it. And Lily Mount asks, do you have any tips on making a picture look alive and have a story? And then she says something really nice, so thank you. But yeah, that is another thing that I love when pieces do it, and I want to get better at it. So I'm figuring it out. But one thing that I find helps me is I try to look at new details that I can incorporate into it, even if it's just small details that hint at something happening outside of what's happened in the picture frame. Really helps. So I it's really small and kind of silly once I actually say it, but things like adding little scratches on their face. I love doing that because it implies that something happened before and they have a life and things are happening outside of what is physically happening right there on the picture plane. So if there's something that can hint at a past event, even just like wear and tear on clothing, things like that, I love incorporating that. It does make it feel a little bit more like it's part of a grand story. Something happened and this is just a snapshot of what's happening to them. I also look for little details that I can include in the piece that's mimicked throughout, and it gives it a little bit more connection with it. So like this one, I have a heart on her cheek, and I also have a heart on the deer, and I have the deer's mouth tied shut. So things like that, where it just feels like it doesn't even have to have an answer. It's just more like why is it like that? I don't know, but it's kind of interesting. So yeah, I'm not a master at that yet, but I am trying to get better at it because I am really passionate about very story-driven illustrations. So I'll work on that, and then maybe I'll get back to you with some more suggestions. And question 3 is, any tips for getting popular on social media like Instagram and Tumblr with my art? I do not have very good tips for that. I do not consider myself particularly popular. Really, when it comes down to it, is just be consistent and put out content, because if people are following you because they like a particular piece and then you don't continue putting things up, they will unsubscribe, they'll unfollow you. Or if you go with a large span of not putting anything up and then you put something up like months later, a lot of times actually people will see that and think, wait, I don't remember this person, why did I follow them? And then they'll unsubscribe from you because they saw what you posted and they weren't used to seeing you and they didn't really remember that they liked you. So just make sure that you are consistent. That is absolutely the way that you grow. And at least my experience with YouTube is that when you're consistent, when you have an upload schedule, that allows people to be able to find you, and it allows like algorithms that help people search and find you. It'll push you a lot higher than people who are not as consistent. So be consistent, but also create artwork that you are excited about. If you don't love it and you're not excited about it, you're going to burn out and you're not going to keep that motivation to create and to keep putting things up there. So when it comes down to it, stay true to you and what you want to draw. And question 2 is, how are you able to get used to using Krita? Because I have a really hard time with it. I actually don't really use a ton of Krita. I use Photoshop, but basically the same thing. When I started, it was super hard because it felt so different from traditional drawing. The way that I made it work is I actually incorporated one step in at a time. So I started off just drawing traditionally, and then I would scan it in, and then I would color it with Photoshop. And then after I got really comfortable with that and got the lay of the land, I figured out how I wanted to create things. I started incorporating more and more steps. I started trying to figure out how to do inking. And because it was something that I was building upon something that I already had, it helped me gain confidence in it without diving all the way into digital and then feeling like I cannot draw anything in this at all. I can't make it work. I'm starting off with the base that I really liked, and then I just incorporated new things to it. So take it one step at a time if you're feeling like you're struggling with it. And Artemis Nightwalker says, I love your art. Your art style inspires me with finding my art style, not copying or tracing. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me to hear, because I have artists that I love and I look up to, and they help me get the motivation to create my own type of art and to work on that. So that really does mean a lot to me. Thank you. Question number 1 though is, could you give some tips and advice for someone trying to become an illustrator or an animator? I don't have a ton of experience as far as animation or what it takes to be good at that, but what I do know is you have to draw a ton, get a lot of drawings out there so that you can just build on your skills. As far as illustrators, like I mentioned before, practice your anatomy and learn. That sounds really big, but practice looking into things and figuring things out. Look at old artists that are really amazing illustrators. One book that's a really great resource is by Andrew Loomis, and I'm kind of blanking on what the actual name of the book is. He has several great resources for artists that are looking to improve their skills, but he has one specifically focused on illustration. And he's one of the gods of illustrators. He is incredible. But this one particular book, he goes into pretty much a crash course in everything. It's everything from composition to creating a good flow to pretty much everything. So if you want something that's really concise and will start jumping you off as far as figuring that out and learning, I would suggest his book. I'll have a link in the description to that book actually. So I'll find it and I'll link it down below. Murad Aliyev asks, what do you search for on Pinterest to find material that you're inspired by? This one is actually really kind of fun to find new stuff through this way. But usually how I end up finding things is simply I'm looking for a particular resource that I want to include in a painting. If it's like a fox, or I want a big poofy dress, or I need a particular jacket, I will put that in there. I'll start searching for things, but I'll let myself click on, because when you search for something, it brings up a lot of stuff. And then when you click on another picture, it brings up similarly related things to that picture. So I'll just follow this flow of one picture to the next. If I see something that looks really cool, I'll click on that, and then it'll bring up more stuff that's more in line with that. So eventually I get to a point where I find a lot of really cool stuff. I specifically try to go with things that are more like photography or artistic, things like that. So when it's a really cool, beautifully shot photo or a really exciting location, things like that, if I click on it, it'll bring me more stuff. And it's stuff that I never would think of on my own, and that's why I like letting it happen more organically that way, because I do find things that have really interesting color palettes or really gorgeous shape language or just subject that I never thought existed or would have thought about. Yesterday I was looking for pictures of a particular type of deer, and I knew that they were like a Japanese type of deer, but I didn't know exactly what kind they were. So I just searched that, and I found, after one picture after another, I found these really amazing resources, things like Japanese masks and really amazing cultural things, wind chimes. There was just all these things that were connected to that I found amazing. So I went ahead and pinned a lot of those. So when I come back, even though they didn't make an appearance in this particular piece, they are things that I will keep there and they will inspire me in the future. I might include. So yeah, it's just a collection of finding things that I find interesting, following that path, and then saving them. And then a lot of times I'll go into the pictures that I already have saved and click on those, and then I'll follow that same path again. So I open myself up to finding new stuff that way. And that's it for the first half of this question and answer video. I'm going to continue it on my next video, which is on Wednesday, so stay tuned if you want to see more questions being answered and more of this piece, because I'm going to both try to finish all the questions, but also finish this piece, I think, so you can see the final result and everything. But yeah, thank you again for everyone who submitted questions. That was really helpful, and I had a lot of fun reading through them. So again, thank you a lot. This is just the sketch that I'm showing you right now. This is the digital sketch that I started with. I want to show you really quick what I started with, but I did make a few changes, as you probably noticed, between now and what I actually worked on while I was inking it. And yeah, I liked the changes, so we'll see where it ends up. I have not finished this piece yet, so I'm excited. But anyways, that is it for today. I do have a link in the description to hopefully everything that I mentioned. I would link to down there, so if you're wondering, it's down there, as well as all of the tools that I'm using and paints and inks, just inks today. And I do have a link to my art shop, so if you'd like to check that out, it's down below, as well as in my end card that'll happen in just a second. So thank you so much for watching. I post every Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I'll see you guys in my next one.